I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. The room was heavy with silence after Sarah's words hung in the air. Jim's heart raced as he stared at her. Was this really the end? He felt a tightness in his chest, like a vice squeezing down hard. Everything they had built together felt like it could just crumble to dust. But then, from across the street, a sudden commotion shattered the stillness. A loud bang jolted them both. They jumped, eyes darting instinctively towards the window. The scene outside had shifted abruptly. People were rushing past, panic painted across their faces. A figure emerged, running with wild eyes, arms flailing. Jim's instincts kicked in. "We should—" Before he could finish, the figure stumbled and fell, sprawled out on the ground. It was a young man, blood soaking through his shirt. The sight sent a rush of cold fear down Jim's spine. He rushed toward the door, Sarah close behind him. "Jim, wait!" she called, her voice trembling. But he was already out, dodging between shocked bystanders. The young man struggled to breathe, gasping for air. It was unreal, like something out of a horror film. Jim knelt beside him, shock coursing through him. "Stay with me," he urged, feeling the warmth of blood seeping through the man's fingers as he clutched his side. "Help is coming! Get away from him!" Sarah's voice pulled Jim back. He looked up to see her face pale, fear etched deeply in her features. "Why?" he asked, panic rising in his chest. "He needs help." No sooner had the words left his mouth than the man's expression shifted. His eyes, once filled with desperation, now bore a flicker of recognition. A chilling grin spread across his face, warping what should have been a moment of vulnerability. Jim's heart sank. Sarah whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "He knows you." "What?" Kim scrambled back. The man laughed, a sickening sound that resonated in the pit of Jim's stomach. "Misdirection," the man wheezed, each word a struggle. Like you did. You think I wouldn't find out?" Suddenly, a wild scream pierced the air as Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. The crowd gasped, eyes widening in disbelief. Jim felt a knot tighten in his throat. What was happening? Who was this guy? As sirens blared in the distance, the man turned his gaze to Sarah, jagged breaths escaping his lips. "It's true, isn't it?" he managed, voice hoarse. "You're not who you say you are." The chill in the air became suffocating. Jim's mind reeled. Secrets clawed at the edges of his thoughts. Before he could process the implications, an officer pushed through the crowd, shouting commands. The officer knelt beside the man, assessing the wound. "What happened?" But the young man's eyes never left Sarah. "You thought you could run, thought you could hide." Panic surged through Jim. What did this mean for them? Everything around him blurred. He could feel Sarah's fear, like a living thing, wrapping around him, squeezing tight. And then, in that moment of chaos, the ground shifted under their feet and reality shattered. A truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, like a storm ready to break. Everything he thought he knew about Sarah, about their love, about his own past, was it all a lie? As he stared into her eyes, searching for answers, his heart raced with dread. "What did he mean?" he whispered, the weight of the world crashing down. Sarah opened her mouth, but it was like she was frozen in time. The sirens grew louder as the crowd pressed in closer. In that whirlwind, Nothing felt certain anymore. What had just been the end of their story now felt like the beginning of something far darker. As Jim searched Sarah's eyes for answers, the weight of uncertainty pressed against his chest. The crowd surged with anxious whispers, eyes darting from the wounded man to them, a silent storm brewing in the air. The sirens wailed, slicing through the hushed tension. Yet the true chaos lay in the revelation unraveling before him. What did he mean? Jim's voice trembled, barely a whisper, as if saying it louder would rip open a haunted door. Sarah's face was frozen, a mask of fear and confusion. Just as he thought she might speak, the wounded man's laughter pierced the air again, rattling through his bones. "You think you know her?" the man gasped, blood pooling beneath him. "She isn't just anyone. She's been playing you all along." The words fell like stones, heavy and unyielding. An invisible thread of panic coiled tighter around Jim's throat. "What are you talking about?" he shouted, his voice shaking with desperation. He wanted to believe Sarah, to find solace in her presence, but her silence felt like betrayal. The young man's smile twisted into a grimace. "The truth you've buried," he breathed. "It's about to get unearthed." Before Jim could react, an explosion of shattered glass erupted from a nearby storefront. The sudden chaos jolted everyone back. Screams cut through the drone of sirens. People ducked, instinctively covering their heads as shards rained down. "Get down!" an officer shouted, hurling himself over the fallen man to shield him. Instinctively, Jim pulled Sarah down beside him, holding her close as the world turned wild. "Jim!" she shouted over the cacophony. The fear in her eyes was a mirror of his own, but it held something else, a flicker of resolve. "We need to get out of here." "We can't leave him," Jim protested, still staring at the man who seemed to revel in the chaos. "You don't get it," Sarah's voice cracked. "This isn't just about him. It's about us. If he finds out the truth—" Her eyes darted, terror rendering her voice raw. "It could end everything." Everything? The weight of her words fell like a crushing blow. A gut-wrenching realization twisted inside him. "What truth?" he pressed, the urgency in his voice rising amidst the surrounding turmoil. But just then, a dark figure emerged from the fog of panic. A woman, moving with alarming agility, swept through the crowd. Her gaze locked onto the wounded man. The air crackled with an intensity that silenced all else. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. The crowd parted, instinctively drawn to her. Jim's heart raced at the recognition. He had seen her before, a shadow from his own past, someone he thought had disappeared long ago. "You don't know what you're doing," she warned, eyes fierce, locking onto Jim. "He'll bring everything down around you." The young man's laugh echoed darkly. "You think you can save him?" he gasped, drawing air like his life depended on it. "She knows. She knows everything. It's her fault you're caught in this mess." "Shut up!" Sarah screamed, desperation spilling over as the truth clawed at the edges of her resolve. "You don't know what you're saying!" But Jim's mind was spiraling. The flood of confusion crashed around him. The pieces of their lives felt jumbled, torn apart by a force he didn't understand. Who was this woman? What did she know? What could Sarah possibly have done? And then it hit him like a lightning bolt. Sarah, what have you been hiding? The world spun as Jin stared into her eyes, seeking the truth he'd bargained for, but realizing that maybe the truth would shatter everything he held dear. Her silence hung heavy in the air. The sirens faded to an unsettling hum. In that silence, a question lingered. Could love survive where lies had taken root? As the woman moved closer, Jim felt a tremor of fear run through him. What would it cost to uncover the truth? And would they all be safe when it finally came to light? As Jim stared at Sarah, desperation clawed at him. The chaos around them felt like a distant echo. The woman, the shadows from his past, loomed closer. Each step she took seemed to pull the air from his lungs. The crowd scattered, oblivious to them. Storm brewing right in front of them. "What truth?" he repeated, his voice sharper, edged with a fear he couldn't shake. But Sarah remained silent, fear etching deeper lines on her face. Her eyes darted to the woman, calculating danger, and Jim's heart raced, not knowing who to trust. The wounded man's laughter twisted a knife in his gut, sending a chill through his bones. Even as the sirens shrieked in the background, all he could hear was the tortured gasping of the man beneath him. "This is just the start, isn't it?" he wheezed. "You can't run from what you've done. None of you can." "What have you done?" A voice broke through the noise. A figure emerged from the crowd, pushing forward, a man with fierce determination in his eyes. Jin squinted. He knew him. It was David, a mutual friend, someone he never expected to see here. With a wild look, David pointed straight at Sarah. "You won't get away with it. You can't hide anymore." The words hung heavy, echoing in the tense air. The crowd's murmurs rose to a fever pitch. Faces turned, eyes darting, horror mingled with curiosity. "David, stop!" Jim shouted, wrenching his gaze between Sarah and David, the threads of confusion. Tightening! His head spun. What was happening? What did any of this mean? What are you talking about? "Don't you see?" David pressed on, urgency in his voice. "She manipulated us all. She made you trust her." "No!" Sarah's voice broke, desperation spilling over. "You don't understand. I had to." "Had to? Do you hear yourself?" David shouted back, and with each word, Jim felt the ground shift again. "People got hurt. Real people. The lives she's destroyed. Stop. Just stop." Closer, an audience to their pain. Jim felt exposed, laid bare like a wound in front of everyone. "What are you saying?" he demanded, each word a plea for clarity, a spark of hope struggling to ignite amid the darkness. But then, in a flash, the woman stepped forward, her eyes now locked on to Jim with an intensity that felt electric. "You really don't know, do you?" she said, her voice steady, cutting through the chaos. The wounded man grinned with a hollow ache. In that moment, the air shifted. Could almost taste the bitterness of it in the back of his throat. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice trembling, as the reality began to settle in. "What don't I know?" Then the unexpected happened. The woman reached into her coat, and before anyone could react, she tossed a small device onto the ground. It hit hard, a metallic thud that echoed. A blinding light erupted, washing over them, brilliant and unforgiving. Everything blurred. The screams morphed into a cacophony of chaos. Jim shielded his eyes. The sound was like an explosion, a heartbeat of fear wrapping around him. And when the light faded, Sarah was gone. Just vanished. Jim's breath caught in his throat. No, no, Sarah! Panic clawed at him as he stumbled forward, confusion swirling in his mind. The crowd erupted into chaos, but it felt distant, muted, as if he was trapped behind glass. "Where is she?" he shouted, spinning around, searching desperately. But she was gone. One heartbeat, everything felt real. The next, it was void. Searing questions burned through his mind. What had just happened? What did this mean? The truth twisted and turned, hiding just out of reach. The pieces of his world began to crumble, and at that moment, he realized everything he thought he knew was just a mirage. "Jim!" David called, grounding him. "We need to go!" But could he leave? What awaited him in the shadows? A terrifying thought rose within him. Had Sarah known this would happen? Was their love built on a lie? As confusion tumbled through him, amidst the wreckage of his world, rage ignited within Jim. He clenched his fists. He would find her. He had to know why. But as the dust settled, a sense of dread crept in. Was he ready to uncover the truth? No matter the cost. Jim's heart raced as he stumbled, searching the chaos. For Sarah, she had just been there. He could still feel the heavy weight of her warmth beside him, the comfort he had always leaned on. But now that warmth was gone, leaving behind a chilling emptiness that gnawed at his insides. "David!" he shouted over the din, a desperate plea clawing its way up his throat. "Where did she go? What's happening?" David's eyes were wide, shock tracing his features. I don't know. One moment she was here, and now," his voice trailed off. The panic evident. The crowd around them surged, people jostling one another, desperate to escape the chaos. Jim's mind raced, confusion crashing over him like a wave. He pushed through the throng, every face a blur. Where could she be? Why had she vanished? Suddenly, a loud crack reverberated through the air. Time froze as a harsh voice cried out from behind him. "Everyone stand back!" A glimmer of silver caught Jim's eye. He turned, heart pounding, and saw a figure emerging from the smoke. A man, unkempt and wild, holding a weapon, a rifle. Panic rippled through the crowd. People screamed, scattering like leaves swept away in a storm. "Get down!" David yelled, instinctively shoving Jim behind a nearby car. They crouched low, hearts pounding, the chaos becoming a blur of frantic movements and terrified cries. Just then, the wild man's eyes met Jim's. "You don't understand!" he shouted, rage spilling from him. "You're all part of this. You have to see the truth." Jim's pulse quickened. "The truth? What truth?" he shouted back, fear gripping him tightly. Every word was a dagger, a demand that cut deeper. That's when the woman, the one from earlier, appeared beside the crazed man, an intense energy radiating from her. "You don't have to do this," she pleaded, hands raised in surrender. "You'll only make it worse." The man swung around, eyes wild. "Worse? You think it can get worse?" His voice cracked, eyes darting. "It's been a lie from the start." "Lies?" Jim echoed, confusion swirling like a storm in his mind. The world felt like it was collapsing. "What are you talking about?" But before he could grasp the insanity unfolding, the man laughed. A cruel, broken sound. "You really think you know her?" "How naive!" He turned to Jim, hot anger igniting in his eyes. "She's the mastermind. It was all her plan. She brought me into this? You think she cares for you?" Every word hit Jim like a punch to the gut. "No!" he shouted, shaking his head furiously. The ground tipped beneath him. "Jim?" David's voice trembled, urgency cutting through his panic. "We need to back away from this. It might not be safe." But then it happened. The loud crack reverberated again. But this time, it wasn't the wild man's voice that shattered the air. A shot fired, clear and unambiguous. Jim's heart stopped. He could hardly breathe. The figure with the rifle dropped to the ground, and in an instant, everything shifted. A body fell, a woman, blood pooling around her. No, it was Sarah. "No!" Jim screamed, diving toward her. But David held him back. "Jim, don't. It's too late." But it felt like his world was unraveling. Sarah lay there, eyes wide, as the life ebbed away. The crowd froze, horror etched on every face. Confusion morphed into panic. "Why?" Jim choked, disbelief hardening in his throat. "Why would you do this, Sarah?" With her last breath, she gasped out, "Jim, you have to understand." Suddenly her eyes filled with a knowing pain, and as if her life force was a final spark to be ignited, she whispered, "I didn't want you to find out." The weight of her words crashed into him. As the sirens blared, again, the chaos returned, but now it was a storm of devastation. "What didn't I know?" he cried, tears streaming as everything came crashing down around him. And in the maelstrom of disbelief, that single question echoed in the air. What truth had he been blind to, buried beneath the weight of their love? "Jim, you have to understand." The world around Jim blurred. Sarah's eyes, once filled with warmth, were now dimming. A hollow ache settled deep within him. "No! No!" He scrambled toward her, but David's grip tightened around his arm. "Let go! She needs help!" "Jim," David said, his voice shaky. "It's too late." Each word felt like it was tearing through him. Sarah lay there, blood oozing from the wound. The crowd's horror mirrored his own. "Please, Sarah," he begged, desperate. "I can't lose you. Not like this." But her breaths were shallow, each one drawing away hope. "You don't know," she gasped, a tremor in her voice. Then her eyes fluttered, and with a final shudder, she was gone. "Sarah!" Jim screamed, pain ripping through him. "No!" The world felt like it was collapsing. A piece of him was gone, shrouded in darkness. The madman chuckled, a cruel sound that twisted in Jim's. "Gut! She was playing you all along! You think this was love? It was a game." "Shut up!" David roared, stepping forward. "Your lies won't work anymore." Just then, a sudden explosion of blinding light in the distance sent shockwaves through the crowd. People screamed. Shadows mixed with the chaos. Jim shielded his eyes, heart racing in panic. Then it happened. The earth trembled as a massive figure lurched from the light, a dark silhouette consuming the sun. It crashed down, shattering the tension, as if reality were splitting apart. Jim staggered back, eyes wide. Was this some nightmare? As the light faded, a giant machine emerged, gleaming yet ominous. Its metallic surface reflected chaos, while its enormous form loomed over the crowd. A voice echoed from within. Smooth, commanding, unyielding. "Citizens of Thorndale, I have come for the truth." Jim struggled to comprehend. "What is this?" he gasped, breath hitching. In that moment, the man from before, wild-eyed and frenzied, suddenly shouted, "She knew! She orchestrated this!" "Enough!" David yelled. "This is madness!" "What is this thing?" Jim whispered, terror gripping his heart. "What truth?" The machine's voice pulsed through the air, cold and calculating. "You are all pawns in a game much larger than yourselves. The one you grieve, she isn't who you think she is." Jim's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" From the dark machine, figures began to descend, clad in sleek uniforms, eyes glimmering with a strange light. "We are here to reveal her truth." The crowd gasped, frightened murmurs rippling through them. They turned, eyes wide, looking from the machine to Jim. "Sarah, she was part of an organization," the voice continued, unyielding. "A secret that has survived generations. She was never meant to fall in love with you, but she did." Confusion surged within him. "What are you talking about?" He felt dizzy, like the ground was slipping away. As if sensing his panic, a woman stepped forward. The same woman from before, stern, unwavering. "You were unknowingly drawn into a web of manipulation. She was meant to keep you from the truth. Now, her actions have consequences." "Consequences?" Jim echoed, disbelief wrapping cold fingers around his chest. "What consequences?" The machine roared to life, spotlighting Sarah's still body. "The truth about all of you will emerge. Bonded by lies, severed by revelation. One will pay the price for another's deception." Time seemed to freeze as realization washed over him. He had built his life on love, trust. And now it felt like a house of cards. What had she hidden? Who was she really? Suddenly, a roar of voices erupted from the crowd. "What do you mean? What is going to happen?" Panic lifted, churning like a storm. "Sarah," Jim whispered, grief vivifying into burning need. But before he could move, a blinding flash enveloped him. Was it the truth or an illusion? As everything went white, fear gripped him. Would he be consumed by the very secrets he had sought to avoid? What truth awaited him on the other side? And with that, everything collapsed into silence, a deep, menacing quiet that left him questioning everything. Jim blinked against the bright light enveloping him. For a moment, he lost himself in the intensity of it. Panic surged as reality teetered on the edge of oblivion. Where was Sarah? What had just happened? The machine's cold voice echoed in his ears, reverberating with dread. What truth awaited him now? Then the blinding light faded, and he found himself in a different place. A dark room, echoing with distant whispers. Confusion clouded his mind. Shadows darted across the walls, and the air felt thick with secrets. Panic bubbled up in his chest as he tried to collect his thoughts. "Jim," a voice soft yet charged with urgency. He turned to see Sarah, alive, whole, standing before him. Relief washed over him like a wave, but it was quickly drowned by confusion. I thought I lost you." She looked at him with eyes that flickered with something deeper. Fear? Regret? It twisted his gut. What's happening? Where are we? But instead of answering, she stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You need to trust me. They're using you. Who? His chest tightened at the word trust. Everything felt wrong. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Figures clad in dark uniforms flooded in, their expressions fierce. Jim instinctively moved to shield Sarah, but she raised her hand. No, don't. Step away from her, one of the officers commanded, voice rough like gravel. She's a traitor. You don't know what she's done. Jim looked between Sarah and the officer, confusion turning to dread. What do you mean? Sarah, what is happening? The officer stepped forward, eyes locked onto Jim. She's been playing both sides, manipulating you. It's all part of a larger game she controls. No, that's not true, he shouted, heart racing. He turned to Sarah, searching for reassurance. Tell me this isn't real, please. Her gaze fell, cheeks flushed with something unidentifiable. Jim, I never meant for it to end like this. The weight of those words crashed down upon him. End? What do you mean, end? Suddenly, a shocking transformation took place around him. One by one, the officers pulled off their masks. Jim's breath hitched. They were familiar faces, friends, colleagues, people he'd trusted. David stood among them, tear-stricken but defiant. Jim, listen to me, David shouted. She's not who you think she is. She's been playing us all. No. Jim felt betrayal bubble into rage. You're wrong. I know. Her. I love her. Your love doesn't matter now. David's voice crackled with urgency. You have to see past the illusion she's created. As the room buzzed with tension, Jim's reality shattered. What did you do, Sarah? He yelled, eyes searching hers. Who are you? I'm sorry, she cried, tears spilling down her face. I never wanted this to happen. I wanted to protect you. The weight of her confession slammed into him. Protect or manipulate? Betrayal clawed at his heart. Stop! Jim shouted, voice trembling. What truth do you all know that I don't? Before anyone could respond, a loud thud echoed through the room. The wall to his left crumbled, and from the smoke emerged a massive figure, dark and imposing. It loomed as if it were a living nightmare. Gasps erupted, confusion spiraled. The figure spoke, voice booming. You think you've lost control? There is always a greater power. Jim, welcome to the end game. His heart raced. The very foundation of everything he believed was crumbling. What endgame? What had Sarah changed in his world? As fear coursed through him, everything he thought he knew was hanging by a thread, teetering toward an unknown precipice. How had he missed the signs? What lay behind the curtain that Sarah had drawn ever so tightly? Desperation gnawed at him. He needed to uncover the truth, no matter the consequences. But the darkness around him deepened, choking hope, and the question loomed heavy in the air. Who would survive the truth? Jim felt the world tremble around him. Sarah's eyes, the warmth he had known, were empty now, swallowed by shadows. The machine's voice hummed ominously, and as it surveyed the room like a predator sizing up its prey, the air grew thick with tension. Jim, Sarah whispered, her voice thin like a thread ready to snap. You have to believe me. I wanted to protect you from this. Protect me? He replied, voice rising. You've done nothing but lie to me. But before another word could escape, the walls around them vibrated, vibrating with a pulse. A sudden crack thundered through the building, drawing everyone's attention. Then, a deep rumble shook the ground, as if the very earth were rebelling. The officers' expressions turned to shock as flashes of light burst through the cracks in the ceiling. Panic erupted. Everyone out now! He shouted, rushing toward the door. But Jim couldn't move. He was glued to the spot, heart racing, staring. At Sarah, not understanding. The massive figure from the machine began to shimmer, light spiraling and twisting, revealing something unfathomable. As if some unseen curtain was pulled back, the air became electric. Shapes materialized from the light, forming into silhouettes, sharp and dizzying. "Stay back!" one officer shouted, panic threading through his voice. But it was too late. The light exploded outward, a brilliant flash that swallowed everything. Jin shielded his eyes as shock waves cascaded around him, throwing him to the ground. And when he opened his eyes again, everything had changed. He wasn't in the room anymore. He was in the streets of his childhood. The familiar sights, the sounds of laughter, the scent of summers past invaded his senses like a tidal wave. Confusion washed over him. "What?" he gasped, rising to his feet. But it wasn't just the street. People he recognized began to filter into view. Friends, family, faces he thought he'd lost. All alive and vibrant. "Mom!" he called, reaching out, desperation clawing at him. The warmth of home engulfed him like a long-lost embrace. "Jim!" They turned, joy washing over their faces. But then, as they drew closer, their features twisted into expressions of bewilderment. "What are you doing here?" they asked, their voices overlapping, confusion underneath the warmth. "What do you mean?" he shouted, taking a step back, heart racing. "I need to find Sarah." Suddenly, the laughter turned to gasps as they pointed into the background. Jim turned to see her, Sarah, running toward him, her face a mask of desperation, eyes wide with fear. "Jim!" she cried, reaching out. "You have to listen." But then, abruptly, a figure appeared behind her. David, now a void of shadows, eyes dark and filled with malice. "Jim, don't trust her," he shouted. "It's all a trick." "No!" Jim felt the ground shift beneath him again, the familiar slipping away. "David, stop!" he yelled, panic rising in his throat. "Jim, please!" Sarah's voice broke, panic lacing each word. "You have to see the truth." But in that moment, everything shattered. The light exploded again, engulfing Jim completely. A deafening roar surrounded him, and the warmth evaporated into frigid despair. When the light faded, Jin found himself back in the dark room. But it wasn't empty. An audience surrounded him now. People he had known, faces twisted by horror and judgment. They pointed at Sarah, now bound and restrained, fear etched deep in her eyes. "Why?" his mother cried, voice choked with pain. "Why did you come back?" Reality crashed around him like a wave. "What's happening?" he screamed, throat tight. "What is this?" From amidst the crowd, the officer stepped forward. "She's responsible," he declared. "She has been manipulating your memories. This is the truth you didn't know." The room erupted in noise, gasps and cries mingling as the revelation struck. "No!" he shouted, clenching his fists. "Sarah would never do that!" But right then, a new color flickered within Sarah's eyes, a flash of something non-human. "Jim," she whispered, voice breaking, "I thought it was over, but it's not what you think. Please, you must." And before she could finish, the walls of the room exploded with light again, sweeping him away. Suddenly, he stood alone, the chaos replaced by an all-consuming silence, gripping his heart with an icy hand. "Jim," a voice echoed through the void, familiar yet distant. "You have to find the truth. It's the only way." In that instant, everything shifted. Love, betrayal, identity. All questions overwhelming him. What truth? What did it all mean? A new fear bubbled inside him. And as he stepped forward into the darkness, it reached out with open arms, hungry for answers. Jim floated in the darkness, the weight of confusion pressing down. Like an anchor, the voice echoed again, pulling him closer, but it felt distant, lost in the void. The air was thick with uncertainty, and he could feel the shadows closing around him, tightening like invisible chains. Find the truth. A whisper, soft yet filled with urgency. It wrapped around him, like a prayer in the dark. But what truth? What could possibly be waiting just beyond his reach? Suddenly, a blinding light cut through the darkness, sharp and undeniable. The burst of brightness hurt his eyes, and he squinted, shielding them with trembling hands. The world rushed back in a dizzying swirl of colors, sounds, and chaos. "Jim!" Sarah's voice shattered the remnants of quiet. But the Sarah that stood before him was different. Her eyes blazed with something wild, something he couldn't understand. She stepped closer, urgency radiating from her like heat. "You have to listen! What is happening?" he yelled, feeling panic claw at his throat. Conflicting emotions swirled within him. Anger, confusion, longing. "What truth do you want me to find?" Before she could answer, the ground beneath them trembled, shaking everything they knew. Deep cracks spidered across the floor as the walls began to collapse. The crowd of familiar faces morphed into shadows, their voices melding into indistinct shouts of fear and confusion. "Get out!" an officer shouted, panic layering his tone. "Now!" Jim's heart raced, but he couldn't move. He couldn't look away from Sarah. "What's going on?" he pressed, a lump rising in his throat. Was she playing him again? What did David mean? And then it happened. A shockwave blasted through the room, slamming into him like a freight train. The lights flickered violently, and with each flicker, a flash of memories sparked in Jim's mind. Moments he thought he had buried deep. A younger version of Sarah, different and skewed. Her smile, twisted. Her laughter echoing like a sinister melody. As he fought to catch his breath, the darkness in those memories wrapped around him, tightening its grip. "Jim!" Sarah cried, desperation painted across her features. "I didn't want you to know this way." Then the ground opened wide. A swirling vortex emerged, a dark, hungry maw ready to consume everything. The air crackled with energy, and Jim felt himself slipping toward it, being pulled toward the truth he had so fiercely avoided. "Sarah!" he screamed, fighting against the invisible pull. "Don't let me go!" In that moment, everything shifted again, as if time itself had paused. She stepped toward him, reaching out, her hand trembling. "This is the truth, Jim. You have to see." And then she whispered something that turned his blood cold. A single, damning sentence that spiraled through the chaos and struck him like lightning. "You're not who you think you are. You were never supposed to be here." Time froze. The ground shook. Reality shattered. The intimate connection he'd felt, the love he'd clung to, it all exploded into pieces around him. A question lingered in the air. Who was he really? A chilling laughter echoed from the shadows. David, standing defiantly against the chaos, smirked. "Welcome to your true self, Jim. Do you really think you could escape?" Jim's heart sank. His world flipped upside down. What was this twisted reality? "Find the truth," reverberated through his mind like a haunting refrain. He had fractured his life, only to discover he had been living a lie. As the vortex widened, pulling at his very essence, the burning question emerged, sometimes crushing. What truth awaited him in that darkness beyond? Jin felt the pull of the vortex tighten around him, dragging him deeper into the darkness. He resisted, digging his heels into the ground. But the weight of uncertainty crushed him. Just then a voice broke through the chaos. "Jim, you have to make a choice," Sarah cried, her figure flickering, the light around her warping and distorting. "Choose who you want to be." "Sarah," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "What do you mean? I want you back. Just tell me what to do." The shadows around them darkened. David's voice reached him, sharp and echoing. "You can't trust her. She's the reason everything has gone wrong." "David!" Jim turned, confusion swirling in his mind. "Why would you say that?" Suddenly, memories surged through him, flashes of laughter mixed with pain. Love intertwined with deceit. He felt the tightness in his chest. It was unbearable. He glanced back at Sarah, her eyes pleading, filled with a longing that twisted his heart. "Jim, the truth is, I did all of this to protect you," she screamed over the growing roar. "You were never supposed to get hurt." "What truth?" he begged, desperation flooding every word. "What do you think I need saving from?" Tension hung heavy in the air. The crowd around him faded into murmurings, faces flickering between concern and fear. But he could only focus on Sarah's eyes. Her warmth, her laughter, the way she felt like home, all exploded in his mind. "You make the choice," the dark figure declared, the ground trembling beneath them. Panic washed over him. How could he choose? Each option felt like a dagger aimed at his heart. "I want the truth," he shouted, voice breaking. "I want to know who I really am." The shadows roared, and the ground shook violently. Light flared again, blinding him, pulling him into a memory. A flash of childhood laughter, running outside, the smell of fresh grass, and a family gathered for dinner. For a moment, he felt safe, whole. But just as quickly, it vanished, leaving him in the dark with echoes of their voices. "You're just a pawn, Jim." David shouted, echoing in his mind. "You need to realize it!" "No!" Jim screamed, refusing to accept defeat. He looked at Sarah. "I choose to believe in love!" A silence fell, and then Sarah smiled. A light, a bright, sparkly force erupted around them, pushing back the shadows. "Then love is what you'll find," she whispered. And suddenly, the ground dropped away. He felt weightless, floating amidst memories that poured into him. Laughter, friends, family. Moments of pain and joy intertwined. Figure faded, reducing to mere whispers in the back of his mind, fading into oblivion. "Jim, join me!" Sarah's voice beckoned, vibrant and alive. He reached for her, heart pounding, soul ignited. "Together!" As his hand enveloped hers, a warm light surged through him, a feeling of relief, of completion. Everything clicked into place. The fears that had haunted him shattered like glass. He was free. Free to choose who he wanted to be, without the burden of secrets and lies. "Thank you," he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I finally understand." But just as they began to drift back to reality, a voice echoed in the distance, chilling his heart one last time. "You can't escape the truth forever, Jim. It will always find you." With one final embrace, the world around them began to reassemble. Colors brightened, clarity washed over him, and he felt the pull of reality reigniting. And as the light filled every corner, a new question lingered in his heart. Could love truly overcome everything? You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on the next thrilling chapter of this story. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. This is the moment to flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to know this conclusion. If you like stories about farmers, about everyday life on the farm, and want to know what really happens in the daily lives of the biggest farmers in the world, the hidden stories of the richest owners, and the secrets of the farm girls that the media doesn't reveal, check out our virtual book with the most famous and secret stories from the farm. Click on the first link in the video comments and get yours now.